Does the equity in your home provide safety and security, or is it holding you back from a life of freedom? The emotional argument is that equity in your home is less debt, and that is less stress about making loan repayments and a feeling of security. The logical argument is that the equity in your home or offset account, they're interchangeable, kind of have the same outcome, which is they're saving you on your interest. We'll go with 5%, but you can insert whatever your interest rate is. So for every 100,000 in equity, you're saving $5,000 a year at 5%, which is worse than if you were to invest in the ASX 300 post-tax. ASX 300, it's the top 300 companies in Australia, index fund in the stock market, very accessible in Australia and provides decent returns for the stock market, which is around 11% pre-tax. If you're in the top tax bracket, paying 45 cents on the dollar, divide that by 2 and you've got your CGT discount. Post-tax, that's 8.525%. So 100,000 in the ASX 300 is $8,525 a year on average versus your $5,000 a year if you just kept it in your equity or your offset account. So it's a $3,525 difference. And if you had $1 million in your home, which a lot of people do, times the 100,000 calculation by 10, that's an extra $30,525 a year just by moving your money from your equity in your home to the stock market. So you've got yourself a beautiful trip to Europe every year. The stocks can be cool, but what if I don't want to sell and pay CGT every time I want to use my money? And what if each dollar in equity could be multiplied by 5 to 10? That's what real estate investing does for you. If we take the same 100,000 example in equity, the banks can lend me 9x. So that's a 90 loan to value ratio, which means the bank fronts 90, I front the 10. So 100,000 of equity can become 50,000 of closing costs for the real estate investment. The other 50,000 can be leveraged into 500,000 to use for that property investment. The historical average of yearly growth in Australia is 8%. So a year of holding a $500,000 asset would be 40,000 gross capital gain. But what about the cost of buying a property? Because compared to keeping the equity in your home or even the small amount of fees if you were to invest in the ASX 300, there are definitely more costs. You've got your LMI, which in this 500,000 property example, and we're going to run with Queensland assumptions. So stamp duty, 16,000, LMI, 8,000, legal fees, 2,000, building and pest inspection, 500, and a buyer's agent fee, 20,000 if you so choose, which would come to 46,500. All of which is tax deductible, which you cannot save for your primary residence. And then the ongoing costs of holding the property. So at a 6% interest rate, you've got $27,000, $2,000 a year in council rates, all the estimations of course, but they're roundabout numbers. 1,500 in insurance. I mean, considering these are Queensland examples, that could be a bit higher in some areas. Maintenance, 2,500. This definitely comes down to the age of the property because that will really determine how much maintenance you might find yourself paying in a single year. And then you've got your rental income, which bumps things up by $25,000, assuming the yield was exactly 5%. So you're at a total of negative $8,000, which is also tax deductible, assuming you're not buying in a trust. So now we've got a big scary table of what would happen over the 5 years in each scenario. First off, we've got your 100,000 in the equity in your home. So you'd be banking $5,000 a year. So you've got 105, 110, 115, 120, 125. It's just a linear addition of $5,000. And then your 100,000, if you pulled it out and put it in the stock market, you'd instead be looking at 11% compounding every year, which would bring you from 100 initial investment, 111 after the first year, all the way to 168,505 by year 5. And then things get a bit scarier in the real estate column because we've got a few extra things to calculate. But essentially in year 1, you've put $50,000 towards your equity as a deposit. You've got 54,500 in closing costs and cash flow costs, and then 40,000 in capital growth. After a year, your gross property value at 8% would come to 540,000. So you're at a net gain of 35,500 after all considerations. Each year I've got your cash flows improving by $50 a week. This is an average calculation. Your rents go up, your rates might come down, things will change around. Generally, your cash flow will incrementally improve over the years. So we've just got that at $50 a week improvement every 12 months. We're going to stick with the 8% capital growth. So that looks like cash flows getting better over time and capital growth improving over time until year 5, where we're actually in the positive for cash flow, and your capital growth comes in at 54,000, bringing your property value to 734 total, which puts us at a net position of $224,000. As you can see, it takes a couple of years for real estate to even itself out in comparison to the other options. If we flick over to our 10-year time frame, you'll see exactly why it's so very worth it and things will pay off. So in your first column, you've got, or second column technically, you've got, and I've been covering the fact that I'm sure you can count, but we're going to year 10 here, $5,000, $5,000, blah, 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 all the way to $150,000 in year 10. In ASX 300, we're going to continue to gain 11% every year until we're at 283,940 in year 10. And then in real estate, what happens is our cash flows are continuing to improve every year. I've just stuck with that $50 a week improvement. And your capital growth continues to compound at 8%. By year 10, the property value has just about doubled or more than doubled, which makes perfect sense because the average property in Australia doubles every 7 to 10 years. So after 10 years, a bit over double makes perfect sense and lands us just where I would expect us to be. Assuming an average investment, if you've hired a buyer's agent, which I've taken into consideration, you would hope that you're doing a bit better than average, but we're going to run with that to be conservative. You're going to find yourself at 619,960 by the end of the 10 years. So here I've just laid out the 10-year results, 150,000 if you keep the equity in your home. So the advantages here are you're not paying tax and it's cash in your bank that you can immediately spend. Then you've got 283,940 in the stock market. And if you want to use that cash, you've got to pay tax, but you do get a CGT discount. So that's nice. And then you've got real estate, which is substantially more when you look at your net position. We're looking at 619,960. And what I love about this is that you can use the equity to get more loans pre-tax. So even if we're back at, let's say, year 4, and you've got 167,000 in the value of your investment property, you can pull out some of that or all of it, depending on what LVR you're allowed to, loan to value ratio you're allowed to refinance back to. You can actually take that out and do all of this column, the third column again. And you can have 2 running at once. So potentially this final number here can be substantially more, and that can branch off into, year 5, another one. It's very expandable. It can branch off very quickly, and it's powerful what it can do. So that's why we've got potentially 4 to 6 more house deposits, very powerful compounding, as I just explained. So what are our pros and cons overall? Cash in the offset or equity in your home, no ability to compound, no leverage, leads to very average outcome, but it feels like the secure option. So you've got the sleep at night factor, but your bed won't be as comfy. Stock market, you have to sell and pay CGT to use the funds. You don't get any leverage generally. There might be ways to do that, but I wouldn't. Still quite moderate / average outcomes. The advantage is it's very low effort and it still doesn't require much to pop your equity or cash into the stock market and do a little bit better. Now you've got real estate, high upfront costs, higher time and effort, but the serious ability to build life-changing wealth. And I'll speak on the time and effort personally. You're dealing with an asset with high intrinsic value. It's one of the main human necessities of our world, which is a roof over people's heads. Things are more likely to go wrong. Things break. You're dealing with real people. There are things that you have to have grit to push through, but as I explained earlier our example here, it pays off very, very nicely. And quite honestly, each property that I manage under my own portfolio, once things are up and running, it probably takes less than a few hours a year of management all up. So it's not that big of a deal unless you've bought a terrible, falling apart, dilapidated old thing that constantly needs fixing, or you've got a bad property manager. Like, these are very avoidable. So my two questions for you are you working for the economy, or is the economy working for you? And these two questions have the same answer as, do you hold cash or do you hold assets? Because if you hold cash and you save your money in a bank account or just leave it sitting as equity in your primary residence, you're working for the economy. You're going to continue having to put output, like physical time and effort output, in order to see returns. But if you're holding assets, the economy is working for you. So when inflation occurs and things go up in price, because you're holding those things, your net worth also goes up in price. Whereas if you're holding cash, that's losing value in relation to the things that other wealthy people are holding. So we want to be part of that group of people. And yes, you may have your primary residence, but there's so much more you can do with it. If you've got a fully paid off primary residence, and let's just say it's $1 million, that's $800,000 right there. That is, it might as well be cash in the bank getting eaten alive by inflation, because that house is going to grow in value whether or not that other 80% is in equity or debt. Wealth is built by holding assets, not cash. And the biggest risk is not taking any risk.